Today I'm going to be showing you how to draft a simple straight skirt. Now these are the measurements we're working with: the waist, hip depth, and then the length of the skirt. So these are our measurements divided by 2 and 4. So let's get started. The first thing you're supposed to do is to measure the length of the skirt. You mark the length. The length we are working with here is 25 inches. Then you minus 1 inch for the waistband, because we're going to have a waistband. But if your waistband is 2 inches or 3 inches, depending on how high you want your waistband to be, then you have to minus that from the total value of the length before marking it out. So the next thing is to put in your waist measurement plus 1 inch for the dart and then 1 inch sewing allowance. I repeat, your waist measurement, 1 inch for that and 1 inch for sewing allowance. Then after that, you come down by 9 inches from the waistline. From the waistline, come down by 9 inches. I forgot to point out something. How to know the measurement to fold your fabric by: you take your hip measurement divided by 4 to fold your fabric, then plus 2 inches. Then on the hip line, you remember you come down by 9 inches from the waistline. That is the hip depth, 9 inches. And then on that line, you take your hip measurements plus 1 inch sewing allowance. You take your hip measurements plus 1 inch sewing allowance. Then at the hem of the skirt, that's where we measure the skirt length, you place the same hip measurement plus the 1 inch for sewing allowance. So here you have the actual length of the skirt plus 2 inches for folding. You have to add additional 2 inches for folding the hem of the skirt in. So after that, we connect from your waist down to your hip. You make sure you use your hip curve so it gives it this nice curve. You don't use your straight ruler. So after curving out your waist to hip, pull it down from your hip to the hem. So here it is, guys. Now the next thing we're going to do is to go down by 1 inch on the waistline. At the center front of your waist, you go down by 1 inch. Then you reconnect up to the side seam of the skirt. So from the 1 inch we came down by, we rule it out, connect it back up to the actual hem of the skirt. So this is it. Basically, the front is ready. Now let's place our dart position. Normally, you to know your dart, you measure it on your body, most likely from your nipple to nipple, your apex to apex, which is usually 4 inch, while some people 3.5. But in this case, we are going to make use of 4 inches for our dart placement. Now you mark your 4 inches for your dart. From the center front, you measure 4 inches and then you mark it out. Now this is it, guys. Yes, straight skirt. I actually used the lining to show this to you guys, because most times I prefer cutting it out with the lining. So in case if there are any errors or mistakes, you can easily make amends and get another lining without spoiling the actual fabric. Because even after chalking on a lining and cutting it out and you realize you made a mistake somewhere, you can easily get another lining because it's cheap to come by, unlike doing it on the actual fabric. So now we are folding for the back. Now take note of the zipper allowance. You have to bring out zipper allowance for the back, and also slit allowance. Now I repeat, you need like 1 inch for the zip allowance and extra 1 inch for the slit allowance. Now we're going to rule out first the zip allowance. First, we're going to rule out for the zip allowance. Now here's a mistake most people make. They get to rule out the zip allowance and also try to use it for a slit. It's wrong most times, and that's why when you're done sewing, you will realize that there is no allowance left for to get that slit at the back. Most people make do with the zipper allowance down to get the slit, but it's not ideal. In my own opinion, it's not ideal. So there it is. Now this is the zip allowance. Now we're going to go ahead and mark another line for the slit. We're going to rule this across all the way up, but it's just going to be for because of the slit. Now we're going to have two allowances, one for slit and the other for zipper allowance. You could just go in and use your tape rule and measure 2 inches or 3 inches. If you're measuring out 2 inches, that means you're using 1 inch for slit and 1 inch for zipper allowance, or 3 inches, whichever one that's suitable for you. So here now, the first line immediate to the front piece is going to be our zipper allowance, while the other one at the end is going to be for the slit. I'm going to show you so you understand what I'm trying to explain by slit allowance. So I'm just marking out the exact shape of the skirt for the back. So after marking it out, I fold it out. I already marked it out, the length and the side. Now, you know the length has extra 2 inches for folding. Now you bypass the folding and then you measure from the first line, the actual length of the skirt. You measure from the actual length of the skirt upward, you measure 7 inches. I repeat, from the actual length. Most people make mistake and measure slit depth from the folding allowance, from the end tip of the skirt or dress. It's wrong. It's at the end of the day, it gives you a very short slit. Your slit would be 7 inches, but if you measure from the end tip, from the extra 2 inches you placed for the folding, you're going to come short of slit depth. So it's best you measure your slit depth from the actual length of the skirt upward. You measure your 7 inches or 8 or 10 inches, depending on how many inches you want to use for your slit. But in this case, I made use of 7 inches. Now, these are marking out is so that you can see the contrast between the zipper allowance and the slit. Now, you can see where the slit ends down there, and then I use the blue chalk to mark out where our zipper allowance is. Now, this is our zipper allowance, as you can see from up, the way I marked it, and then where it stopped is where our slit is going to be. It's so clear, and I use the different chalk markings to indicate that, so it's going to be very clear and you understand it very well. Now it's very important to always put that slit allowance. It's very important. Now on the waist, What I did at the waist area on the waist for the back now, you come in by 1 inch from the zip allowance area. You go in by 1 inch to give the back center back of the back piece this nice dip at the waist side. Now you go in by 1 inch and then you come out by 1 inch on the side seam for the back, so that we don't go short of allowances. Now we are going to retrace our allowance, our zipper allowance. I repeat, on the back piece, you go in by 1 inch on the zipper allowance side, go in by 1 inch and come out by 1 inch on the side seam. The 1 inch you take out from the center back, you have to turn it to the side seam so you don't go short of allowance. Now you retrace the zipper allowance. Now I'm making use of different chalk colors so that you can see it clearly and you're going to understand what I'm marking. Now the first pink chalk, we can see that is no longer useful to us. What we're going to make use of is the blue chalk, that's for the waist area. Now what I'm doing here is our dart. For the back, you just divide it into two and you mark for your dart. Divide it into two. Now that's going to be our dart placement for the back. Now we can see the back is ready. The back is ready. I hope you understand this very clearly. It's very easy, very easy. For the back, I repeat, on the waistline, you go in by 1 inch on the zipper allowance side and you go out by 1 inch on the side seam. You have to replace the 1 inch you took out from the center back so you don't lose or go short of fabric on that area. Now it's time to cut it out. You're going to cut it out and then also place it on the brick and cut it out. Now this is it, guys. You notice that on the slit area I curved it out a little. I didn't want it to have that sharp edge, so I just curved it. You curve it a little and give it a little notch at the curve. You give it a little notch. Now here's a mistake that most people make, and most people are confused about this part. Now this is it. We have 2 inches to fold in for the fabric, and that means the lining would have to be shorter than the actual fabric itself. Now I repeat, the skirt has 2 inches folding. Yours might be 3 inches, you could have just 1 inch, but whatever amount of inches you have for your folding, you have to make sure that the lining is shorter than the actual fabric itself. Now this is one way you can do it. I'm going to show you two ways, but this is the first way. You can cut it out this way. You place the fabric on the lining, cut it out, but then this is still not the actual length you're looking for the lining. Now the way I did it the first time is the normal way people actually do it, but this is a very easy way I'm going to show you right now. Very easy, very easy. Even if the lining is long, the same length with the skirt, because you're going to use the lining to fold the skirt up. Now here's what you're going to do. Now you can see that this lining can't fold the skirt to the actual length it's supposed to. It's still too much in length. Now here's what you're going to do. um you have to make sure that the lining starts at the tip of the skirt after the 2 inches at the hem at the tip. So it has to be short, that it starts, because you're going to join it at the tip, the hem of the skirt. So if you leave it at this length, you can see that the notched um place is still not aligning when we folded it in to meet hem to hem. So now this is one of the easiest way I've found how to get this lining length, this lining folding for the hem of a skirt. To use the lining to fold it in very neatly and nicely. You just place the lining on the fabric, fold it up to where the notch stops. You have to make sure that you notch the 2 inches. Make sure you notch where the hem allowance stops, because you're going to make use of that notch to cut it out. Now you place the lining on the fabric, pin it down. You have to pin it down very well so you don't make any mistakes whatsoever. Make sure you adjust it very well, pin it down, you hold it down neatly before you proceed to folding the hem. Now we have pinned it down, you just fold it in neatly to where the notch ends. That's it. Now you know we're going to need allowance for joining the lining to the fabric, to the material. Now we're going to fold up that allowance. Now this is just for accuracy. This is for accuracy. Now we are sewing in that part for the fabric. That's what we are going to use to join it to the lining. So while folding it in, that's the sewing allowance for the hem, the folding up. Now folding it up so that we can also have that same allowance for the lining. Now I repeat, first you place the lining on the fabric, then you fold it up to the notched area where the notch stops, and then you close in your allowance before cutting. Now we're going to cut out the excess that we don't need. We will cut out the excess that we don't need. Now make sure you don't cut the fabric also. Don't make that mistake. You're going to cut it out gently. You're going to see we'll have the actual length we need for the lining at the end of the day. This is the exact way I get that accurate length that I need for the folding for my lining. Now you cut out, make sure to check you're not cutting the fabric. Now you unpin it. Now remove the excess that we don't need. Now you see it's like magic. We have the allowance for joining the lining with the main fabric, and then by the time we fold it up, this is it. It's going to be this exact same way. Very easy, very easy. Now Basically, what this means is that if your hem allowance for folding up a skirt or a dress is 1 inch, that means your lining is supposed to be 2 inches shorter. I repeat, if your hem folding is 1 inch, you put 1 inch for folding up the hem. That means your lining is supposed to be 2 inches shorter. If your hem folding is 2 inches, that means your lining is supposed to be 4 inches shorter. Your lining is supposed to be double the length shorter. So, thank you very much. I hope you understand the lesson for today on how to cut a straight skirt. Thank you very much for watching this video up to this length. I really appreciate. Please don't forget to subscribe, click that like button, share the video, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much, guys. Bye bye.